Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I are going to give you a look at Millennia from Karma Games. This is the newest game from them. These are the people who brought us Clans of Caledonia. From the designer and owner of Karma, Juma El-Juju.
Yep.
This is a civilization game with a lot of different things going on, including some drafting, some building, some like tableau management.
Definitely some tableau management.
And management of the tableau is something you don't always hear. You hear tableau building, which you do in this game, but it might go away.
Yeah, tableau management's a good way to play. And also the thing that I love most in games, which is tracks. Look at this. Look at all of these tracks. And you'll notice that we've got movement on all these different tracks. We did kind of set this up mid-play so you could kind of see and we can manipulate the game. And also, of course, we're playing or setting up here for a 2-player game. It plays up to 4 players?
Yes, it plays up to 4 players. And there are going to be some differences. I'll say right off the bat, at 2 players, might be a little meaner.
Oh, well, it's a drafting game, right? So I think anytime you take a drafting game from 4 players where there's a lot going on to 2 players when you can look at another player and go, what do you need? Oh, I think I'm going to take exactly what you need. It definitely does feel like a meaner game at 2, but I think any drafting game has an element of hate drafting, especially this game, because it's not necessarily that these cards are multi-use, because they're not.
No.
But they fulfill a lot of different requirements.
Later in the phase of a round.
They're used for a lot of different things. So you might have one card that you're trying to draft that's a linchpin.
For a few things.
For a few different things.
And then if someone takes that card, those few different things go to 0 things.
Right, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah.
There are other ways to try to get some of those things done, so it's not that you're completely blocked out. But anyway, that's just a difference between playing with different player counts. The actual gameplay of the game is the same. You're just going to have some more choices to choose from when you have a 4-player game.
Yeah, and we're not going to go through a complete how to teach by any means. In fact, it's quite a bit of things.
Look at this icon sheet, too.
Yeah, they've got an icon sheet. I mean, again, very thorough.
I think every icon ever.
It may seem a little overwhelming to look at, but it is very thorough and helpful. It answers almost everything between that and this little card, player aid card. Not to mention, they have all the cards that have specific abilities listed in the back of the rule book.
Almanac, which is really
so
helpful.
There's not anything that you're going to be wanting for in terms of explanation. You might just have to look for it a little bit. But like I said, we're not going to go through a full how to play, but we want to kind of summarize what you're doing in this game and kind of pull it together in bigger chunks than what they've have phase by phase.
I mean, there really are 2 cruxes of the game, or 3 really. There's a drafting phase, a building phase, and then an action phase. But the drafting phase is what's going to kind of set the stage for everything else that you're doing in the round. And there are 14 cards that are coming out here during the draft, 14 different symbols that are the 14 different types of technologies that you're going to have in this civilization. And these are kind of staggered so that every round you are going to get one of each of the 14. However, that does mean there is only one of each of the 14 available in any one particular spot.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because like Ryan alluded to earlier, you're drafting these for a few different reasons. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Mechanically, what you do in the draft, you're just going to place one of your draft tokens next to a row of cards and take one of the cards. Now, like Ryan said, in a 2-player game, those spots are limited. This is for 4 players. These 2 bottom spots wouldn't be available, so it's very tight already. You're going to take that card and simply add it to your tableau. You're not, paying for anything. There's no cost to doing that. And most of the cards are just going to add an icon. In fact, all of them will. A few of the cards will have some immediate effects, like I might take first player. Someone might take a token that lets them build first or get a discount on building, things like that. But you're going to draft those cards. The other thing you can do with your draft token is take one of these special actions. Again, you're not taking the action now. You're just effectively kind of drafting the option to take that action later in the game. And there's a number of those actions, many of which are associated with the track, and some of which let you do a couple of other things.
Yeah, but the primary reason that you're drafting these cards, or at least the 2 primary reasons that you're drafting the cards, number 1 is to take those actions on the board. Because you'll see that each one of these cards has specific icons, and you're going to see those icons all over this board as well. Each one of these actions takes a different pairing of icons in order to activate. So when you're kind of planning out your turn, you're kind of wanting to think about which actions you're wanting to take before you draft a specific card. But also, you're going to have 2 sets or more, based on your player count, of prosperity cards at the top of the board. And these are another set of icons that if you can collect and if you have them in your tableau by the end of that drafting phase, you'll get to move up a special prosperity track as well. So already you're kind of torn between, do I want to go for the actions? Do I want to go for the prosperity? Or do I want to get the most income? Because each one of these sections has its own income value. And if you draft more cards from one particular section, you could end up with more money for the build phase, which is really important too.
Yeah. And that's not all of the variables going into that consideration. The one last thing, and probably the biggest takeaway from this game on a whole, is that these cards have sort of ages associated with them. These cards that you see right here are all from Era 1. But you can see some of the cards have little tokens. Actually, this is Era 4 because we're mid-game.
Yep.
But all of the cards have little indicators for what eras they're good for. Because when you bring them down to your tableau, they're good for that era, and maybe that era only.
Yeah, some of them are just for one era.
This card right here, if I draft it in the 5th round, I can use it in the 5th round, and then at the end of the 5th round, it's going to go away. Yeah. It's not going to be part of my tableau anymore. That's how all of these texts work. Some of them, as you can see, 5, 6, and 7. So I could draft this one and know that I'm going to have a science icon for the next 3 rounds in my tableau. Right. So the things that use science, I'll be able to use that for 3 rounds, knowing if I get that card, I'm good on science for a few rounds.
But there are other ways to get those icons if you don't get a particular card you want, because after we finish the drafting, you're going to check your prosperity, move up the tracks, you're going to gain your income, and then you're going to spend that money that you got on income. And if you were lucky, you might have some money left over from the previous phase. Maybe. And you're going to use that money to build some buildings. And there are different types. There's wonders up here, which are all in-game scoring. And then there are different types of buildings. Some of these do give you scoring. Some of them give you ongoing effects. Some of them give you tap abilities or exhaust abilities.
Or just more icons.
Or just more icons that you can use. So there's a huge variety of what these buildings can do. And you're only going to have a certain number available. And this is it's not really a draft, but it does kind of still have that feeling, because if you have the first builder marker, you can guarantee that you're going to get the building you want.
If you have the money.
If you have the money. So again, these things kind of work together in an interesting way, that you might want to take cards that give you a lot of income so that you have a lot more money to buy buildings, even if the cards that you're taking aren't necessarily the best for your engine. It's kind of a thing you have to really balance.
Right, so we've talked about how you're getting most of the cards in the game into your tableau. You've got the text here, you've got the buildings and wonders there, you've got some cards in your tableau. Then you're going to move on after that to the actions phase. I wouldn't exactly call this the meat and potatoes, because the game has so much in each of these steps. But the actions phase are where you're getting a lot of things done.
Where you're doing the things with the cards.
Using all those cards in your tableau to do a number of different actions. One of those is to interact with these tracks, like we said. There's this many of tracks for all these different icons here, and you're able to go up those by spending, like Ryan said, either pairings, or even more so in some case. This one, for instance, takes one of this icon and then 3 of any of these icons. So you're not going to like fly up these tracks.
No.
And you're also not going to go up all of these tracks.
You're definitely not going to go up all these tracks, but these tracks do have all the satisfying things you'd expect from a track-driven game.
Yes.
When you go up some tracks, it moves you up other tracks. You unlock some bonuses. Some of these tracks are tied together where you have to move up a certain track to move up another track to a specific level. All of these tracks are going to give you different bonuses. They're going to give you some in-game scoring. Some are just going to give you straight up points. Some are going to give you points and benefits every time you hit the end.
Some of them split.
Some of them split, and you have to kind of choose which direction you're going to go. So there is a lot that goes on with these tracks, but just know that you're trying to move up each one of these, or you're going to try to pick a few. And of course, you're going to have some scoring cards. In addition to how each track scores, you're going to have some wonders that maybe want you to get up specific tracks as well. So again, when you're drafting, you're trying to make these different combinations in order to move up these different tracks. However, there are, again, other ways to move up these tracks if you didn't get the right cards.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when you do use the cards to move up these tracks, you're exhausting those cards. So if I have this, I can't go up that track, willy-nilly. I'm exhausting those 2 icons to go up this track. And then if there's another reason where I want to use, say, one of those icons somewhere else, for example, I don't have that card anymore.
Right.
If I want to go up purple and blue, I better have 2 of those cards so that I can tap both. Or like Ryan said, there are some other ways to get some of those icons. There are some Joker cards that you can get, and you can get those in a number of ways. We had mentioned these special actions down here. This is during this phase when you could use these as well. Most of these are just going to let you go up a track. So I could just go here and remove that token and go up the population track or whatever track is indicated. There's another one here down at the bottom where any number of people can go, and it's going to get you a Joker card. This is basically a blank card that you can have in your tableau just for this round, and you can tap it and use it as any one icon to do any of the things that we're talking about. And then there's a lot of sort of ancillary actions over here that let you kind of navigate and manipulate. Say you built a tableau, and you're really trying to get a pair of cards, but Ryan drafted that other you needed.
Drafting I talked about.
Exactly. So you're left with one that's not terribly useful. Well, you can trade it in for 2. You can trade any 2 in to get a Joker, or you could just spend some of that excess money. And when I say excess money, it's probably not going to be a lot of money.
Yeah, if you're planning on buying the icons you're missing, you're probably not also buying a lot of buildings. You have to kind of balance that. But yeah, these auxiliary actions, they're really helpful to get those icons that you're missing. Because, again, there's so many different reasons you're going to use them. One of them being this research area down here, which is huge. Once per round, you can cash in all of your research to take one of these research bonuses. And you're getting this research from a variety of different ways. You're spending some different card combinations to get research. You could take this action to get research. And there's just some things out on the board that might give you these research cards. You're basically cashing it all in, turning in all of your research, and buying one of these things. Now, one of the things you can possibly get with that research is one of these bonus cards. And these are going to give you ongoing abilities or scoring opportunities that you'll have once you unlock them. And there are 4 of these that are chosen randomly every game. But again, there's only some specific spots where you can get those cards. And if you're in a situation where you accumulated 10 research, that 14 points is maybe more tempting than taking one of the cards. But you can only do one thing no matter how much research you have.
And 14 points is not nothing in this game for sure.
No, that's a lot of points.
It's quite a few points. And just to be clear, those cards, you're not taking those. You're able to sort of achieve those.
Yep.
All the players at the table can do any of those if they want to. But it is an interesting thing. And then the last thing I want to mention in the actions is the diplomacy action.
My favorite action.
This has a deck of cards that is probably the juiciest deck of cards in the game because you're going to take this action by exhausting these 2 icons.
Yep.
When you do, you get to draw 2 of the diplomacy cards, keep one, and discard the other. The one that you keep is a one-time use. You can use it whenever, so you can keep it and use it when you need to. A lot of them are usable in certain instances, like it'll say, when you do this thing, discard this to do it even better, that sort of thing. These are big cards that can really change the game quite a bit and do some things that other players at the table aren't expecting to happen necessarily.
Well, yeah, and for me, this is one of my favorite parts of the game because I'm a big fan of when you draw a card and you feel like, can I really do this?
This seems crazy.
This feels like I'm cheating the game.
They're big.
They are. They're huge actions that get you a lot of the different stuff you're needing. But, so that action phase, you're doing all of this stuff. You're doing all of these actions, and the game rulebook actually recommends that you can just do it simultaneously.
Yes, and we would recommend that too.
I would, because you're doing a lot of stuff.
You're doing a lot of things. Yeah. You just want to take your time, go through it very carefully, but especially at 3 and 4 players, it's going to benefit you. In fact, the rule book specifically says they do not recommend not doing simultaneously, particularly at higher player counts, because it'll just keep the game moving.
And here's the interesting part, I think, of this, because you do have this tableau, and you are, triggering a lot of different things, and it's very difficult to explain even in the video how that satisfying feeling of like, okay, move up this track. When I move up that track, I have a building that gives me points. When I move up this track, it gives me a bonus that moves me up another track. Oh, and you're just doing so much on your action phase. It feels really satisfying, but you might not be able to keep that tableau, or you won't be able to keep that tableau for the whole game.
That's one of the most interesting things, and it's bittersweet at times, because like we said, there's so many variables in your mind when you're taking these cards. You might take them and go, oh, that was I got this
really
engine going,
turn,
I got this. And then it comes to upkeep at the end of the round, and you're having to basically get rid of cards that have aged out. And all of a sudden, you might go from having 6 or more cards in your tableau that you just used to maximum, and losing most of those, going down to maybe even 2 or 3. This all comes down to what cards you're drafting and how long they're going to last in your tableau.
And that can be devastating to a certain point if you don't plan ahead, because your strategy of like going up these particular tracks to get points is going to matter based on those cards, because all of these tracks, like I said, they all score points, and they score more points if you can get to the end. So if you have a really good engine that's moving you up these tracks for a couple rounds, all of a sudden you lose that engine. You got to find new ways to move up those tracks, because it is important. I want to talk about one though, in particular, the military track, because all of these score in different ways. This military one is actually interactive. At the end of every round, you're going to look at whoever's highest on the military track, and you're going to look at whoever's lowest on the military track. and everyone's going to move down, and then everyone's going to score points based on where they're at. So if you're, hammering that military track and you're trying to make a name for yourself by being at the top of the military, and then all your military cards go away, that's going to give other players a chance to maybe even surpass you on that, which this is the only track that actually moves up and down.
Yes.
All the rest of the tracks, you just continue to go up. Of course, you'll go up until you run out of ways to go up. And that is a very interesting thing that happens.
Yeah, and there are plenty of cards in this game that would suggest that going off the end of a track is a thing.
Yeah.
There are research cards, there are endgame scoring cards,
Yeah.
there are even things printed on the boards that say every time you would go off the end of this track, you get a thing. So I do believe, like I said earlier, you're not going to go up all the tracks, but you might want to focus on a few of the tracks, just like any game like this, and get off to the end and really score some big points. And like we said, the points scored kind of ranges all over the place. Some of the tracks just score straight up points, like the Prosperity. There's a couple here that will multiply from one another to score your points. Here's some more down here that will give you certain milestones where you've achieved points. And then on top of that, and all those points you've scored during the game, there is likely going to be a lot of endgame scoring points. Because these cards over here, the buildings and the wonders, if you've done that well, you could score a lot of points there.
Yeah, there are specific buildings too, these yellow buildings, and of course all these wonders that are marked with that hourglass. Those never age out. You have those forever, but they don't do anything until the end of the game. And a lot of these are going to score for your tracks, for things that you've collected, and just for things you've done in the game. I mean, I've got right here in front of me a set of cards that could be worth like 40 points.
Yeah.
So it's very obvious that you can score, hundreds of points at the end of the game just from all of these cards that you've collected.
And those will also give you your guidance throughout the game.
Yeah.
Ryan picked those cards up, so now he wants to get to the ends of those tracks. So that's going to sort of give him some guidance, but also all the players at the table some understanding of what he's going to be trying to do, which brings us back to some of that little hate drafting from time to time.
I mean, definitely. When you're looking at these wonders, they are very expensive. So if you're going to hate draft a wonder out from somebody that can really use it, you are going to be paying maybe even your entire pot of income just to get, like, this one's $24, which is why that that builder token helps. But again, that focuses into how you're going to draft. So you can kind of see now how I think all of this ties in together, and it all really does tie back into that draft. There's so many different ways you can go with those cards, but you really need to have some kind of plan of what you want to do on your turn.
Yeah.
Other than, maybe just drafting willy-nilly, it helps to kind of see the actions you want to do, see the buildings that are going to score, and try to plan out what you're going to do. Of course, the best plan only goes until somebody drafts the card you want.
Yeah, and you will find out what that best plan is at the end of 8 rounds, and someone is crowned the winner with the most victory points. But that is Millennia from Karma Games. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, of course, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.